Hello dear students, we will be continuing with debt to total assets ratio. Now that should be on page number 4.29 in your textbooks. We'll be carrying forward from where we had left the other day. The other day we concluded with proprietary ratio and I told you that we will be continuing with debt to total assets ratio. Now, as the name suggests, the meaning is pretty clear. Debt to total assets ratio is equals to debt by total assets. And if you can see, where they've written about the explanation of the ratio, they have written that debt over here includes long term borrowings and long term provisions. That's number one. And number two, total assets is, of course, about non current assets and current assets both. Moreover, for the note that they've given for computation, you will see that it is always expressed in the form of pure ratio, and so it is debt by total assets. As the name suggests, you can go through the objective and significance like I have highlighted in the other ratios when we've already started doing it in the class. I will be discussing with you the first illustration under this. They say that calculate debt to total assets ratio. It is debt by total assets. If you see the sum, illustration 48, they've given debt, so by default you will be considering debt to be long term liabilities, so 16 lakhs, and total assets, of course, undoubtedly it is 48 lakhs given straight away, so that would be 16 lakhs upon 48 lakhs, and if you reduce it in fractions you will be getting 1/3, 1 by 3, but then we got to express this ratio in pure form, and by this time you all know what is meant by pure form, isn't it? So it would be converted as 0.33:1. Now the very next illustration is illustration 49, where you see shareholders fund is there, reserves and surplus are there, total borrowings, short term borrowings and other current liabilities are there. You're supposed to calculate debt to total assets ratio. Now we all know that debt to total assets ratio is debt by total assets. Now you will leave considerable space and then you will be finding out long-term borrowings and total assets. Now total assets, what is the other way out? We know that yes, of course, total assets is the summation of non-current and current assets, but total assets will be written as shareholders fund plus long-term borrowings on the debt. So basically capital plus liability. This I don't need to recollect, but we've already done since class 11, from the very beginning of our accounts days, when we learned the accounting equation to be assets is equals to capital plus liabilities. Here the name is more formalized. It is a much more advanced formal name. So capital is called as shareholders fund, liabilities is called as other long-term borrowings or debts, and of course assets is total assets. So by chance in any problem you find that they've given you capital and liability, that is also a round way out to calculate assets like they have done here. So you've got shareholders fund plus long-term borrowings or debt, and that would be summing up to 8 lakhs plus 16 lakhs plus 2 lakhs plus 6 lakhs, again coming to 32 lakhs, and long-term borrowings, that will be of course, if the total borrowings are given and you deduct short-term borrowings from it, you will be getting total borrowings minus short-term borrowings, which will be long-term borrowings of 16 lakhs. You put it into the ratio and you will get 0.5:1, because 16 by 32 would be reduced into half, and like I always have said that you got to convert it into the purest form, that is the denominator has to be converted into 1. Please mark illustrations 53 and 54 to be important, of which definitely we will be discussing illustration 54 in the class, because we are supposed to calculate all three over here: debt to equity, and we are also supposed to calculate over here debt to total assets, and also proprietary ratio, right? So that is illustration 54. You can come to 55, where it's a similar sort of a thing. You will find the horizontal balance sheet given there, and you have been well versed with this format of balance sheet when we were doing comparative and common size statements. So equities and liabilities have been given, assets have been given, then the bifurcation has also been given in the working note area, as like in the other sums you will be finding out long-term debt and shareholders fund, and then you would be equating that and finding out the three ratios that have been asked. Now after proprietary ratio and debt to total assets ratio, we come to the last category of these coverage ratios, and that is interest coverage ratio. Now of course interest coverage ratio establishes the relationship between net profit before interest and tax, and interest on long-term debts. Now, interest coverage, so of course you will be worried about interest, definitely. So the denominator is interest on long-term funds, whereas numerator is about net profit before interest and tax, that we popularly call as PBIT, that is net profit before interest and tax. Let's take up an example, a sum and illustration, and you'll be able to understand. This is illustration 59. Profit after interest and tax 6 lakhs is given. 10% interest long-term loan from State Bank of India. SBI 6 lakhs is given. 12% debentures, that's also long-term loan, 20 lakhs, and tax rate 50%. You're supposed to calculate interest coverage ratio. So for interest coverage ratio, leave adequate space. First and foremost, we're supposed to calculate interest. So on the long-term loans that you've taken from the bank and debentures, please calculate interest. That's coming to 3 lakhs. Now calculation of profit before. Now see, PBIT means profit before interest and tax, and PIT is profit after interest and tax. Now here in this scenario, profit after interest and tax has been given, so we basically have to back calculate. Concentrate on working note number 2. So here the calculation of net profit before tax would be rate of tax is 50%, right? So in a roundabout way, if tax is 50%, then of course profit, let profit before tax be 100. So tax is 50, so profit after tax will be 50. So profit before tax will be definitely profit after interest and tax into 100 by 50, the reciprocal value, isn't it? So that's coming to 6 lakhs into 100 by 50, that is 12 lakhs. Now 12 lakhs is profit before interest. Interest is 3 lakhs, so profit before interest and tax added back would be 15 lakhs. Now you've got PBIT, you've got interest, so 15 by 3, that comes to 5 times. Now, unlike the other, debt to total assets and debt to equity and proprietary, this particular ratio, this would be, expressed in times, right? And we will be taking up activity ratio and profitability ratio in the next lecture. Activity ratio, if you see, that more so deals with trade receivables turnover ratio, trade payables turnover ratio, working capital turnover ratio. Trade receivable means obviously bills receivable, and along with that debtors. Trade payable will be creditors and bills payable. Working capital, we know it deals with the difference with current assets and current liabilities. We'll be taking up that. And inventory turnover ratio, that's also another very, very important. Well, we'll be talking about average inventory, that means opening and closing stock of inventory. And the final category of ratios that we'll be dealing with further would be profitability ratios. As of now, we just wind up with the second category of ratios that fall under the second group after current ratio and liquid ratio, and we are through with liquidity and solvency. We are left with activity and profitability, that will take up further in our next lecture and the class. Thank you everyone.